What are we discussing on today's podcast, you ask? Well, we got to preview the D-backs versus Rockies series, and no one to do that better with than Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies, all on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I'm Millard Thomas, host of this wonderful podcast. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millerthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel. But without further ado, we got to bring on the man of the hour to discuss the D-backs next series and hopefully the D-backs next losing foe, because of course we love seeing the D-backs stack win. So we got to talk to the man of the podcast of who we're playing next, the Rockies. So we got Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies here. Woo, woo, woo. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. I am enjoying a Rockies off day currently, but
Okay.
we are certainly very excited by another matchup with the dreaded Arizona Diamondbacks.
Serpientes. Yeah, we haven't talked since the preseason, and off day for both of our teams as we're recording this on a Thursday. As a D-backs fan, we're sitting 14-12 atop the division. Super very early, of course. Can't talk standings too much because people don't like talking standings in April, Paul. But since it is so early, there's still so many games to make up. Just how are you feeling so far as an 8-18 Rockies fan?
Not great. I can tell you that. I mean, I certainly thought this Rockies team was going to be a little bit better. I wasn't blind to its issues, but the issues have been bad, and it's been incredibly disappointing to watch the Rockies play bad fundamental baseball. This is a team that's I don't know if necessarily if it's still holding true, but has been leading the league in errors the entire season, if not most of it. I believe it's still going on. I don't think any team has overtook the Rockies. It's a team that has been dealt an incredibly bad hand when it comes to injuries, and the exciting prospects have not really come out the gate exciting us. So unfortunately right now the Rockies are in a really tough spot. And one thing though, it's what's a little bit better, even though the Rockies are still playing losing baseball and are 3-4 over their last 7 games, they lost a lot of one-run games that they certainly could have won. The Rockies have been in situations in plenty of games where they could have won. But again, when you lack strong fundamentals, you lose ball games. Teams will take advantage of that, and that's the most frustrating part. And honestly, the Rockies did have technically, statistically, the worst pitcher in all of Major League Baseball in Jose Urena before DFAing him. So very few things have necessarily been great, but there are a couple of things, I mean, that to be excited by, but those are my general thoughts going on with the Rockies right now.
Yeah, cheers to DFAing really poor pitchers in the rotation. That has been the theme of both of our
I'm
teams.
so scared Bumgarner's heading to the Rockies, dude. That sounds like such a Rockies move. Herman Marquez, what's going to happen now with him coming off the IL, leaving his last start early with a different arm injury? Tons of worry there. Madison Bumgarner to the Rockies, unfortunately, in my eyes, seems like a collision course, and I would be so let down.
Well, let's talk it out, Paul. Let's do a quick exercise. Why are you against Madison Bumgarner? Just because, I don't know, what would be the downside to adding Madison Bumgarner to the Rockies rotation right now?
Even the Rockies' top prospects aren't pitchers. There's not a lot of pitching depth in the system for the Rockies in general. But at this point, I don't care. I want to see every young guy that the Rockies possibly have, because at this point, and with the way the Rockies have played, including these vets in their lineup, yes, it's April and early. I just hope the Rockies are willing to punt sooner rather than later, and they are showing that that is not the case. They have demoted Eleris Montero instead of letting him play through a struggle, and moved Ryan McMahon back to third base, and have Alan Trejo starting at second base every day now. So only one of the Rockies' big name prospects is playing right now on the Rockies at the moment. And, they did just call up an exciting prospect in Brenton Doyle, who had a pretty okay series against Cleveland. Nothing to be too upset about with a guy making his debut, especially taking in a 3-hit game. But the Rockies are showing the wrong sign because, again, of their lack of willingness to just punt, to rebuild. They don't want to do that. And even if you're not super excited by what you have in the minor leagues, I'm more excited to see a young Rockies pitcher come up and make his debut. A Noah Davis, a name that you'll see in this series, actually, who comes up, has 2 great starts, and honestly is a factor in that DFA of Jose Urena. Jose Urena's performance is part of it, but German Marquez Davis is called up to replace German Marquez, and Noah Davis pitches strong for the Rockies, and you have to keep him in there. And so that's encouraging, but even with the success, how much do I want to see Mike Moustakas play this year? To be totally honest, it's not that much, especially if it still ends in Rockies losses.
Yeah, it's hard for me to disagree with that sentiment just because of where like the D-backs are. Like right now, it's like if the D-backs do have any shot of the wild card, like I want to be able to put the best players on the field. And it's like a guy like Madison Bumgarner, where just every 5th day you knew you were going to start with like a deficit, basically. You were spotting the team to run. So it's like, why even put that guy out there? If you do have true aspirations of making real noise this year, then having someone like that holding back your rotation is never going to help your team. And even if the D-backs were in a position where they were, maybe in 5th place in the NL West right now, it would be the same sentiment. I still wouldn't want Mad Bum in the rotation. I would want to do what you're saying and put as many rookies and young guys in the rotation and give those guys opportunities, because even if Mad Bum went to the Rockies, I don't think you guys could rehabilitate him. I don't think you guys can help him. It's not
what good would it do to bring Mad Bum in to go pitch at Coors Field, a guy that hates pitching at Coors Field? Madison Bumgarner hasn't necessarily come into Colorado and dominated in his time in Arizona. I mean, he certainly has had good stretches, but as unfortunate as it is, sometimes, especially pitching nowadays, you just kind of lose it. If you go up against elite hitting, and which the NL West and baseball is full of, and now with all of the offensive numbers trending upwards, you can't do what you're doing. And that's a frustrating part with even the Rockies' successful pitchers. And actually leads me into an interesting question, Millard. 2 pitchers on the bump to start the series. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on Kelly, because I like Kyle Freeland a lot as a player and as a guy. I don't consider him like elite, but I still think he's a good pitcher and a solid contributor to a team. But 2 players with kind of 2 different issues. My issue with Kyle Freeland is the home run, the long ball. 6 home runs given up on the year already for Kyle Freeland in 27 innings pitched. But for Merrill Kelly, 17 walks in 26 innings. That's crazy. But 2 pitchers that I think still have plenty of capabilities, and their team clearly believe a lot in them to make them the second in their rotations.
Yeah, I'm going to save that question for you, Paul, because that is a premium matchup, and anyone who is a D-backs or Rockies fan needs to go to that game. And if you need tickets to the ball game, then Gametime is the best place to do that, because I got this sweet little overlay here for our YouTube audience, because Gametime, buying tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's why I use the Gametime app, because Gametime is the place for last minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticket app in the country for a reason. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, to get back into the podcast and answer your question, Paul Holden, yeah, it's been a weird season to start the year for Merrill Kelly, who I think, like we were just talking about, a deserved number two because he's probably not everyone's ideal version of what a number two pitcher is. And probably in the perfect world is more like a number three. But with the way he pitched last year for the D-backs, he was so good, so consistent last season. And really was like a workhorse, like quietly had over 200 innings pitched last season. And the thing with Merrill Kelly throughout his whole career they can rely on is the fact that he doesn't walk people. Like, he can eat innings, and he's not just going to put dudes on base with sloppy and lacking command, not locating his pitches. But so far this season, it's been a little bit up and down with his command, and he's been walking dudes, and he's always had like early inning struggles. And we saw that again this year, where it's like the first couple innings of a ball game is the areas where Merrill Kelly struggled the most. But then he'll get through those next 3 or 4 innings. But then it seems like around that 6th inning again, later in the game, he starts to struggle again. So for Merrill Kelly, the bookends of his starts haven't been that bad. The meat and potatoes in the middle have been really good, but it feels like the first and like the 5th or 6th inning, it gets a little wonky for him. So I want to see him get back on track. And this series that we're playing it's in Colorado. So You never know at Coors Field. I mean, if you're walking dudes, like, he's had a couple home runs allowed too. So if you're walking dudes at Coors Field, like, you never know. But maybe you won't have to worry about that as much with the Colorado Rockies this year, because I'm just looking at the team stats, Paul. Like, the Rockies, for no matter what their record is, they're always like at the top of the leaderboard when it comes to like home runs and average and stuff like that, because they play at Coors Field. But right now they're sitting like bottom 5 in the National League in average runs, home runs. Like, what's been going on with that offense? Because that's been like usually the point. Like you could usually attribute just being in Coors Field to at least having a league average offense, but that doesn't seem to be the case this year.
It's actually been a trend for a while, going as far back as even with having Nolan Arenado and in the playoffs of this team. Obviously, better offense there, but the offense has just been trending downwards since then. And this is a team that lacks clutch hitting. This team does not come up big in certain situations. There are good hitters on this team, but they don't string it together. Surprisingly enough, Charlie Blackmon and Chris Bryant have kind of proven to be a pretty good 1-2 punch. Charlie Blackmon still has his issues and stuff. It's nothing. He's not as an excellent hitter to say anymore, but Chris Bryant swinging the bat well. But again, this team just comes up absolute flat and short when it comes to driving in runs and clutch situations. I mentioned the Rockies playing losing baseball and playing close games, multiple 1-run losses against the Phillies that they blew late that they should have had after a 5-run lead. And again, a team that hasn't taken Coors Field as they haven't made it a place that's a threat for players. It's now a treat for players. It's a place for opposing teams to come in and feast on Rockies pitching that is underperforming and Rockies offense that simply isn't up to par right now and has a lot of people that aren't doing a ton. I mean, yes, CJ Cron has hit 5 home runs this year, but he's batting .221. I mean, he's still, this team strikes out. Good Lord, do they strike out. And it's just kind of been the same situation, the same story for years now at this point. I was hoping to see a little bit more from Jurickson Profar, who's had some flashes and some really interesting things from the top. I think he's been better on defense in some ways than offense, but he's had a couple leadoff home runs. It's just a team that just is not really that good on offense right now. It's whether it's pitch selection, whether it's just swinging at bad things. And again, the young guys that they were hoping for, Ehlers Montero and who is now in AAA, and Ezekiel Tovar, the starting shortstop, just haven't gotten a lot. But there's signs of showing that it's going to improve. But the bright spot for the Rockies offense is Chris Bryant. 312 average, an OBP of 379, is slugging of 452. It's not incredible, but it's certain. Chris Bryant comes to the dish with a great approach and is a Rocky that is likely to contribute with just solid base hitting, and which is what they're trying to have him do. It hasn't been great, but again, this is a Rockies team that desperately needs to, I like to say, weaponize Coors Field, and they haven't done that.
Yeah, Chris Bryant definitely seems to be that silver lining in the lineup right now. It's probably, validating to see you give him that big contract. And even though last season was cut short due to injury, he did play well when he was healthy, but now he's back healthy this season and he's looking like Chris Bryant once again and playing like an all-star. So with that being said, does that make you wonder whether, if this Rocky season continues and they continue not to play, good baseball, should the Rockies start to explore what they could get for Chris Bryant? Or do you like, what? Let's just wait till we get to the offseason. And Chris Bryant is that good. He's living up to the contract. Let's, our team always talks about championship or bust. Let's actually add pieces to this Rockies team and actually build around Chris Bryant. So what do you think the Rockies should do?
I put the likelihood of a trade of Chris Bryant very, very low. This is a Rockies team that has wanted Chris Bryant for a long time, and they have their guy for a long time. And with the way contracts are going in baseball, maybe Chris Bryant's is actually going to become one that might be less ludicrous than some options that might go, especially as I think the next 2 free agency cycles, there are going to just be just a couple of really outlier contracts that kind of throw things out of whack for a little bit. If I'm the Rockies, I certainly explore trading everybody. I mean, every veteran that you have on your team should be up for trade, other than I'd say Charlie Blackmon. Because I think Charlie Blackmon is the one guy you would keep for the fan morale and the fan stuff. But let's be honest, if you could get a haul for Chris Bryant, that's what you should do. Chris Bryant isn't going to win you a championship in the next 7 years unless all these position player prospects pan out and the Rockies are able to convince starting pitching to come here. This is a team that doesn't have they have good and they're at an improving farm system. Sure. The Rockies have been working to improve that system, but it's not a team that can just turn to and immediately just bring up this whole full crop of people. If you're going to really buy into this next core group of players that you have, which I think is the idea of the Rockies, then absolutely you should. This season is a wash. The Padres aren't going to be this bad for a bit. No. The Diamondbacks in the Rockies are not fighting for the basement this year. It is abundantly clear. The Rockies are bad. Until the ownership just needs to admit that the Rockies are bad. And it would make what's crazy is they have this perception of admitting all this stuff and doing all this stuff is bad for business and bad for the Rockies. We're just waiting for them to say it because it's more frustrating to be an actual Rockies fan and sit here and them to say, no, we're going to do this. And then again, where has inactivity at the trade deadline led the Colorado Rockies? It's led them to 8-18 at the end of April, looking at the bottom of the NL West by a long shot and by a lot of metrics, an awful baseball team. So you cannot continue to do the same thing. And if a team is going to take the deal, the Chris Bryant money, let's be real. The Rockies will pay $160 million of it. And if they really want to get rid of him, but I don't think Chris Bryant is going to say a criticism of the team needing to add players. I think Chris Bryant likes playing right field for the Rockies. I think he enjoys being he's not under scrutiny of Chicago. The Denver media being scrutiny of the Rockies is not just focused on Chris Bryant, especially if he's going to be playing well. It's going to be more focused on the ownership and the team, the state of the team. So it's not just Chris Bryant. CJ Cron absolutely should be traded. Mike Moustakas should absolutely be traded. Jurickson Profar should absolutely be traded. They all should be, because there's younger guys that could come up and finish the season for the Rockies that you hope to see on the Rockies in the next year or two anyway.
Well, I want to ask you, Paul, who you think the best trade asset is on the Colorado Rockies. But if you think you could be a better GM than the Rockies GM, then maybe you need to download the Pro Baseball GM app, because Pro Baseball GM is the coolest game I've played in a long time. I've always thought it could be a great Major League GM. And as it turns out, it's not all that easy. If you've had the same thoughts and have fantasized about managing your own franchise, go and download Pro Baseball GM immediately. The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of a franchise, playing through seasons and leading your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty. In the simulation, you're responsible for hiring the right coaches and staff, managing team finances, scouting and drafting players, managing through difficult personalities and injuries, navigating a franchise through free agency, and all the ups and downs of a season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Baseball GM is completely free, playable offline, play on the go as you want and when you want to. Right now, I'm going against the other Locked On MLB host with my Phoenix Pirates, and I'm coming for Paul Holden's team. I'm trying to win some money out here. So Locked On Diamondbacks listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up on the App Store. That's probaseballgm.com, Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. And don't forget to catch every D-backs hometown pitch on the SiriusXM app when you download the app and search Diamondbacks in the app. Now, Paul, I do want to ask you, because I do think there's some interesting trade candidates on this Rockies team. If they did, become sellers at the deadline, probably CJ Cron would be my favorite target to go after. Not for the D-backs. I'm just thinking of like a general baseball team. I just think as a sweet left-handed bat, power guy, good average, usually having a little bit of a down season. Maybe he'll come back with a new change of scenery and bounce back. But in your power ranking, who do you think would be the best outside of Chris Bryant, the best Colorado Rockies trade asset, and who would hurt the most if you got traded from the Rockies?
I think CJ Cron's actually fallen down the list. I think people are going to be very here's the deal. Will a team that has other things to pad out be okay with a power hitting first base ad for a low buy at the trade deadline? Absolutely. CJ Cron can play first base. He's fine. He's not that much of a liability on defense. And he will hit a ball 500 feet. He's certainly capable of doing that, but he'll strike out twice in that game with the bases loaded. He has struck out multiple times with the bases loaded, but it's a guy that had 100 RBI last year. And it's a guy that already has 10 on the season. CJ Cron, when he hits the ball, will be successful, but I'm going to put him at maybe like 3 because I think the Rockies' number one option. I think teams will be very interested to see in Ryan McMahon. I think they're going to see a player in Ryan McMahon that the Rockies, something isn't working in the way the Rockies are handling Ryan McMahon. And a team kind of like the Yankees saw DJ LeMahieu, I think is going to be a similar situation where they're going to see, hey, this guy can play Gold Glove caliber defense. He's had a couple errors already again this year, but that the Rockies, I think that might be I think a change of scenery might be big for someone like Ryan McMahon. And I did a crossover with Locked On Mariners, and Ryan McMahon would be a player that could fit into that system over there, especially because McMahon can play second base. He can play third base. He could potentially even DH with how highly the Rockies think of him. And I think teams are going to be interested in Brent Suter out of the bullpen for the Rockies. He has been again, the Rockies did go out and just get this guy. It's a random one where the Brewers had plenty of success. He just walked, and the Rockies were just able to luck into a certain thing. And a guy I hope the Rockies don't get rid of, because I think he is going to be someone that could be a really great piece going forward and potentially the closer of the future for the Rockies, is Justin Lawrence. Justin Lawrence, I think, is someone that's going to be intriguing to people because, like I've said a lot on the show, he brings exactly what you're looking for out of the bullpen: velocity, a slider, funky arm angle, big head of hair, lots of fun, at least from what I'm looking for someone that comes out of the bullpen. When you throw a slider from way down and like in there and it crosses from looking at your elbow and then it, ends like outside of the plate. Perfect. He's been great. So I think that those are the candidates. But again, people ask this all the time. Charlie Blackmon ain't going anywhere. That guy is going to retire a Rocky. I'm almost positive. The Rockies would have to get something really tempting. The Rockies are not going to trade Charlie Blackmon for a lottery ticket prospect or a late round draft pick. There's no way. This Charlie Blackmon's a guy that plays in the lineup every day, whether it be DH, he's still playing in the field. He's beloved, but I would say those are the most likely pieces, but it's tough because if the Rockies trade pitching, their depth there is so thin that would make the Rockies in an even worse situation. And again, I think this is an ownership that's going to really try to avoid that 100 losses, but it's looming. So I kind of want to flip it in the same sense for you, Millard, for trades for the Diamondbacks, but more so also just in sustainability of this team. team
Mhm.
14-12. I think the most impressive thing the Diamondbacks have done is wallop the Dodgers. I think that's a
Yeah, I'm out.
statement you can make in the NL West. So I'm curious, where do the Diamondbacks need to be towards the trade deadline to stand pat or add or not sell, and instead maybe think about buying, or at least just saying, hey, third wild card's what we're shooting for, free agency, stuff like that, where is going to be more the focus here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like they would have to be, in the wild card race or within, 3 games of the wild card race. I think you would have to keep up the good vibes that you had from the beginning of the season until the All-Star break, where you're like maybe around a 500 team. I don't know how many games are played by the All-Star game. Probably 90. Like if you're like 42 and 41 or something at the All-Star break, maybe you're second or third in the division, you're 2.5 back of the third wild card spot, something like that. Like I think the D-backs would be perfectly content with that. I think they probably, with the way the season's going, like that Madison Bumgarner DFA does tell me the D-backs are serious about this season. And so I do think at the deadline, maybe they will try to go out there and maybe add a reliever from maybe the Colorado Rockies if they can, or maybe try to shore up, I don't know, some spot in the lineup that they feel like could use an upgrade. I feel like they probably wouldn't really upgrade the lineup. It'd probably be a rotation or a bullpen move. But I do think the D-backs are taking this season seriously. I don't even think if we got to the deadline, I probably don't even think they would probably make a big move. They would probably stand pat and just keep the team and ride, what they already have in house, because they have so many young guys already and so many dudes that are talented that have pretty high ceilings and pretty good potential that they just want to see what what their actual ceiling is and give those guys as many opportunities as possible. So they would probably stand pat. If anything, if they came to the deadline, maybe add a reliever. But for the D-backs, the way that they're going right now, like, D-backs fans, we're not having World Series aspirations or anything like that. Like coming into the year, we're like, if we get an 8 in front of that win-loss record this year, whether it's 81-81 or 87 wins, like that would have been a successful D-back season. So far, it's gone way better than I expected, and part of that's because the Dodgers and Padres have started off to slow starts. But as we're nearing the month of May, as we're heading to this Rocky series, the D-backs are sitting in first place in the NL West. Not something I thought I would have said, 30 games into the year.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the NOS is going to get better. It's certainly, you're not, the Dodgers and San Diego are not going to flirt at 500 for the rest of the year. But I think that's a great mindset to have. And I think certainly, again, if you get 87 wins, you're in the conversation. It does not matter. If you have 87 wins, you're finishing the season, at least those last 2 weeks of the year, you're saying, we have a shot. It might be, if you lose a couple, it might start being, well, this team's got to lose and we got to win. And then this team's got to lose 2 in a row, that type of stuff. But it still feels good to be in it. And, if it's certainly not the same way, but it could pair out to like a 2021 Mariners, a team that overperforms and then arrives, maybe even a little early next year or last year. And, it's a team that wants to do more. I don't know if there's the same parallels, but that storyline could certainly be the Diamondbacks one.
Yeah, I think the most disappointing storyline would being like the Baltimore Orioles of last year, where you're overperforming expectations. You get to the deadline, you're in striking distance of the playoffs, and all of a sudden your GM is just trading off your closer, trading off other pieces on your team. You're like, what are you doing? We have a chance to make the postseason, and you're just squandering years. I don't think the D-backs are doing that this year, because when you have talent in the building, like, windows are so small, and just the way baseball has gone the last few years, where we've seen these minus 90 win teams, these sub 90 win teams, to make it all the way to the World Series. And you got the Braves winning it, got the Phillies finishing runner up. Like, I think it's led to so many more GMs expanding their mind of, you don't need 95 wins anymore to be a World Series team. Like, if you're in the American League, it's probably going to be the Houston Astros, because they're in the championship series every single year since 2017. So you either have to get through them to make the World Series. And then in the National League, it feels like anybody can make it, because you got teams like the Dodgers and Mets who are not afraid to choke it down in the wild card division series. So it always feels wide open in the National League. And that's a great thing with baseball too, because it's not like football. Like in football, the playoffs are a single game, so anyone can win. But baseball, even though it's a 7-game series, it still feels like anyone can win. Like, you kind of really do throw away like the regular season records. Like in the NBA, I know the Bucks as the 1 seed just lost to the Heat, but more than often than not, the higher seeds are going to beat the lower seeds. But in baseball, it really feels like a free-for-all, like football, once we get to the playoffs, even though it's a 7-game series. So I think that's the best thing that the D-backs have going for them. Get in the dance, and how we've seen the playoffs the last couple of years, anything can happen.
Yeah, just get there. And that's what I was hoping the Rockies were going to try to do. in other years, but unfortunately it's fallen flat. And you know, as we're getting kind of close here, they think the thing to look at this series is the difference. It's an Arizona team that's sitting at the top of the NL West this year instead of the bottom. It's a team that is fighting to get out of the basement versus the team that stayed there. And it's another series where there's going to be fireworks too. Arizona could come into Coors Field and do some damage. They are no strangers to doing that.
With the NFL draft going on tonight, who are the Broncos picking with their first? Who are they taking with their third round pick? Is that the only pick that they have, Paul Holden? I'm sorry. Tougher. Hey, you got the Nuggets though, right?
Hey, Nuggets in 6 though, buddy. Nuggets in 6.
Yeah, maybe we should just turn this into a baseball podcast with Nuggets versus Suns next round. Maybe that should just be the headline of our podcast. Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies. Where can the D-backs listeners find you on social media and everywhere else?
You can find us at LO Rockies, Locked On Rockies on YouTube. You can find me at Paul Holden 33. And for those interested, the world's largest in-person Mario baseball tournament coming up in June. If you want to come hang out with the best Mario baseball players in the business, you can check us out there. You can follow me on Twitter for more details there. That's where you can follow me at Paul Holden 33. That's all. That's the stuff happening in my world. Millard, what about you for the Rockies fans?
Yeah, I'm trying to get locked into the Super Mario Brothers movie. I want to go see it in 3D like this weekend. So that's like my next task. Follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24. Look up Locked On Diamondbacks on Twitter, Instagram, wherever. Just search it up on the podcasting your podcasting app or your social media app, and also follow us Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube as well. That's Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies. I guess maybe we'll talk after the series, maybe not, but let's go D-backs, baby.